Good evening, and welcome to the closing night of Insights 2007. My name is Doug Powell. I'm a former chapter president of AIGA Minnesota and a former AIGA national board member. I've been working with, there's all sorts of noise going on back here. Can you hear that? I've been working with Andrew Blauvelt and the staff of the Walker Design Department to program this year's series. Boy, it's kind of nice to have a new setting. I was talking to Pat Carney before the session, and we were saying it feels like we've been sitting at the kids' table in the other room, and here we're at the grown-ups table, so enjoy it. Before I turn the stage over to Andrew and Jop, I have a few brief announcements. On the AIGA side, we are in our anniversary year, 30th anniversary of the founding of MGDA back in 1977, and the 20th anniversary of the founding of AIGA Minnesota in 87. And we are in the process of planning all sorts of exciting events for the end of 2007 to celebrate this and recognize this important milestone for our design community. So just want to put that on your radar screen, and you'll be getting lots of communication about that as the year progresses. So we hope to see you again in the fall as some of these events start to take shape. In addition to that, we have an upcoming event called Portfolio One-on-One, which most of you are probably familiar with. That's our student design conference. It's being held Friday and Saturday, April 13th and 14th. If you are a design student, this is an excellent opportunity for you to learn more about the local design community and to connect with local designers through the form of one-on-one interviews and panel discussions and workshops and so on. If you are a professional designer interested in a very, discreet volunteer opportunity, in other words, no committee meetings, this is a great opportunity to give back to the community by being one of those interviewers. It happens on Saturday, April 14th. So if you're interested in doing some portfolio reviews, contact the AIGA Minnesota office or go online and find out more information at our website. One final programming announcement, and that is to reiterate an announcement that Andrew made a couple weeks ago about the documentary Helvetica, which is having its Twin Cities premiere, not here, back at the kids' table on May 31st, and that evening will be followed, or that presentation will be followed by a Q&A with the director. This is an event that's being co-presented by the Walker and AIGA Minnesota, so we're very pleased about that. You can buy tickets for that at the box office downstairs or at the Walker website. And one logistical announcement about this evening: once we get into our Q&A session, there will be ushers with microphones, and it's important that we use those microphones for the audience questions so that they're picked up by for the webcast. If you just shout your question out, then it won't be picked up, and it'll sound like an awkward silence followed by brilliant rhetoric. So with that, I will turn the stage over to our guests for the evening, Jop van Bennekom and Andrew Blauvelt of the Walker Art Center. Thanks.
Oh, this is our Gitmo lighting scheme, so we know there are people out there. And if you laugh, we'll know, but if you don't laugh, we won't know. Welcome to the Walker Art Center. I'm Andrew Blauvelt, the Design Director and Curator of Architecture and Design Programs. We're very, very pleased to have with us, finally, we've been trying a little bit over the years for Jop to come visit Minneapolis. And this season, this series was the perfect opportunity. The title of the lecture series is Discontents, and it was really exploring alternative forms of publishing, particularly those initiated by graphic designers. And I think Jop represents sort of the ultimate confluence of these various roles of editor, publisher, and of course designer and art director for 3 different magazines. The earliest being Re Magazine, a magazine of everyday life. That was, I believe the first one was 1997.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's how we met, actually. I have to give you the anecdote, right? Because how does Jop arrive here? I met Jop in the Netherlands at the Unvarnished Academy in Maastricht as a tutor there, and Jop was a graduate student, postgraduate student, as they say there, working on this new magazine. It's a very intriguing magazine, but as Jop reminds me, I had incredible jet lag, so therefore I said nothing, apparently, in critiquing it. It was like, oh, it's wonderful, it's interesting.
You didn't say anything at all, I think. That's what I remember.
I know, I was taking mental notes. We filed this away because in the future, in 2003, I curated an exhibition called Strangely Familiar, Design in Everyday Life. And it was a design exhibition that crossed many different disciplines: product design, furniture design, graphic design, architecture, fashion. And it was incredibly difficult to locate interesting projects within the realm of graphic design, only because a lot of graphic design is for something else. And so it needed to be a little bit more pure to kind of fit in the exhibition. And Jop's magazine, Re, was featured in that exhibition. So that's sort of how we reconnected years later. But besides Re magazine, he also publishes probably what many of the public here in the U.S. would know, which is Butt magazine, whose subheadline keeps changing. But a magazine
from Magazine to right now, because they always also do like Fantastic Man. It used to be Fantastic magazine for homosexuals. Then we kind of changed that into Amazing magazine for homosexuals, but now we put it back to a Fantastic magazine for homosexuals again.
So Fantastic is above Amazing in the spectrum.
We also had one issue. We also had like Hysterical magazine for homosexuals. So it's keep on changing all the time. So.
I see.
But like Fantastic magazine for homosexuals, that's kind of sums it up a little bit.
Indeed, it does. Which should allow me to preface this by tonight's lecture may contain adult imagery, and so that's to warn all the webcast public. And grandma's downloading this; she'll be quite startled later on. So fair notice. Then finally, the most recent publication is Fantastic Man, and which we might call a fashion magazine, or about fashion, around fashion. And how we thought we'd structure the conversation this evening, this is also a little bit different format for Insights to have a conversation, but Jop will kind of lead us through a little short tour of each of these 3 publications. And then we'll have a more in-depth conversation, maybe that crosses some of the themes that you see. And hopefully, if we get all the technology to work, there'll be some. Basically, he downloaded the PDFs from 3 entire issues of 3 of those magazines that'll kind of be scrolling behind us. So if we find our conversation dull and uneventful, you can at least get visual stimulation from just behind us.
And what you're actually going to see is like the whole magazine, including the ads, and it's the 3 most recent issues of the magazine, or the magazines. And the issue you're going to see of Butt magazine is the issue is not out yet. It's at the printer right now.
So preview, special bonus feature.
Oh,
actually, and then I was supposed to say, well, we had our best intentions of. Oh, look at that. You can subscribe some more. We had our best intentions of having this book available, of course, for Jop to sign and promote, but of course it's sold out and it's in its 2nd printing. So, which I think you're working. Well, you might want to change it, or maybe a little bit. 1st edition, 2nd edition, or are they just going to reprint
I'm in contact with Taschen, the publisher, right now about that. But it's also kind of pretty much the best of the magazine. So you cannot really add a lot of things to it. Or you have to do special kind of projects for the book. I don't know. I think it's good the way it is. It's kind of like cheap. It's literally it's very cheap, but it's also the way it looks. It's kind of like very unpretentious, which I like.
No, it's a fantastic value. It's like less than $30, I believe.
Yeah.
It's 560 pages, so you can do the math.
It basically is a deal, and no, it was quite successful.
I think, I should probably do your resume a little bit more justice, or maybe you don't want to talk about it, but you were actually art director for a couple other publications in the Netherlands before this string of publications, first with Blvd, which is a culture magazine.
No, it's more like the Dutch equivalent of The Face, like the British magazine.
Okay.
Kind of, but not within like the same kind of quality.
But a millennial version or the 80s version?
God,
for those of you who might know.
It would like function the same way. It's kind of pop culture magazine. Kind of bring music and fashion and a lot of things together. And I also designed and also edited actually for a magazine, which is an architecture magazine.
Right, which is actually, is it still around or is it?
No, it's a weird kind of project. It's like always a collaboration between the designer and look here, the esoteric kind of moment.
It's like Star Trek or something. Yeah.
No, but God, yeah, for a magazine, it's a long time ago. It's a kind of interesting. It's an interesting kind of architecture magazine, or at least the edition that we made. I think we made like 5 issues. Was that we really tried to create other kind of vocabulary for architecture, one is much more related to daily life and the function of architecture instead of the object. So
right, yeah, no, it's actually pretty amazing if you can get your hands on one of those 5 issues. It kind of totally recasts the nature and condition of architecture, I think, into its reality, which is often divorced in architecture magazines. It's quite interesting. So let's. Should we start? We're starting with the most recent, actually, which is the first. It looks like the first issue, I think.
This is the first issue of Fantastic Man, yeah.
And Rupert Everett.
With Rupert Everett. Yeah.
How many chips did you cash in?
How many, sir?
How many favors did you have to do?
Oh, no, nothing at all. It's kind of weird that he actually wanted to be on the cover of this magazine that nobody knew, you know. But we knew him through, we were working with someone at the time for the fashion part of the magazine. We just started, and he happened to be a good friend of Rupert Everett. We asked him, and he was like, "Yeah, of course, sure." So there you go, Rupert Everett on the cover.
Is he in a cornfield? Where is he at?
No, he's actually in Miami. He's actually in Miami.
Oh.
He lives like most of his time in Miami, in a resort.
Now that you say it, it does look rather poolside.
It looks a bit like a cornfield, actually.
There's like Man of the Corn or something. It'd be kind of funny.
I don't know. If I'm looking back at it, I can hardly believe how kind of campy this first cover is. But what I wished was to really have like a smiling man on the cover of a magazine. It's something you haven't seen in so long time. I mean, we've been looking a lot at like early 80s issue of GQ and a lot of like older 70s men's magazines.
Did they smile then?
They smile. They smile. It's friendly. It's kind of open. It's mostly also guys who are a bit older. I mean, that was the first thing we wanted to kind of like change with Fantastic Man, was like the market for men's magazines, which is basically either a kind of pedophilia kind of approach, so to speak. It's like 12. No, really, it's like 12 years old in designers wear, in some kind of like by the stylist and photographers create kind of fantasy world, or it's like the world of cigars and buying antiques and that world that's, you know, kind of created by the advertisers and
kind of more infantilism.
Yeah, it's like Condé Nast launched Men's Vogue in the US like a year ago or something, and that's totally that, you know. It's kind of no, you could actually lure into the world of the advertisers when you read that magazine. But there's lots of those kind of magazines around, and so we wanted to make a new kind of magazine for another kind of man. So
of course it's black and a 2-color cover.
It's a 2-color cover, yeah.
Was that a strategic decision or a constraint?
God, I was thinking that I wanted to make a cover of the magazine which feels kind of textual, feels almost a little bit like an old kind of literature magazine.
Yeah, I mean the photograph has some of that feel.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah.
So I want to create something that also has a lot of white. I mean, it sounds kind of superficial, but it's a pretty textual magazine, and there's a lot of emphasis on the writing. There's a lot of like text-only pages, which is kind of, you know, a lot of magazines don't do these days anymore. So no, it immediately has a different feel to it. And of course, it all kind of starts with the title of the magazine.
Which arise from out of butt, like you were saying, or
well, it's kind of weird because Fantastic Man has an edition. It's way bigger than Butt magazine, and it also has a bigger format. It doesn't feel the kind of like feel this kind of zine or that kind of underground that Butt feels like, but it's basically a spin-off of Butt magazine.
So it's a larger circulation.
Yeah, it's a large circulation. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's very. Should I press?
Yeah, just press.
You can change. So it's kind of about, because maybe a lot of people haven't seen it, but it's kind of, I always call it like, it's not, I have a hard time calling it a fashion magazine in a typical sense, because it's kind of about fashion.
It's a kind of about fashion, but it's not a fashion magazine. I mean, we call it kind of like cheeky a gentleman's style journal. And that kind of like sums it up, but we kind of like want to reinvent what it is to be a gentleman. Like, we do believe in good manners, and in a sense of perfection.
And he certainly has it. I mean, yes.
Wim Crowell, the designer.
Is that? I was going to guess. Is it?
It's Wim Crowell, the Dutch designer, the kind of like hardcore Dutch modernist kind of graphic design. He's kind of the, let's say, the inventor of that.
He was a director, right? Museum director for a while.
He used to be the director of the museum Boijmans en Beuning in Rotterdam. Yeah, but he did a lot of things, like those telephone books from the 70s in the Netherlands,
right,
like the ones that don't have any capitals. No, it's like it's kind of radical work. He has a kind of radical.
It's very democratic.
It's very democratic, but he's a very radical kind of democratic, I think. But no, in a way, the magazine is also like very personal. It's also like revisiting your own heroes and people you would like to meet. And
so, were you involved deeply in this one, or do you commission that one out?
Yeah, I commissioned the text and I commissioned, the pictures, and I played for stylist a little bit on the set. No, it's actually shot at the Rietveld Schreuder house in Utrecht. That very famous house of Rietveld. That's like on the World Monument List. Which is a fantastic. Right. I've never been there. It was like amazing building.
There's an interesting story behind it. The woman who commissioned it and her relationship to Rietveld. But that's like a whole nother magazine.
There's a whole other kind of story, but it's like everything is on a really small scale. It's like modernism, but it's like on a kind of like. God, it's so. It's like so. It feels so kind of like homemade or self-made. How you say that?
Right, and the scale is strange. It's like Japanese or Danish scale, So it's
it's very Japanese
off.
Actually.
Yeah,
it's a very Japanese feel.
Makes you feel taller. So maybe that's the trick here, actually, because he looms like a giant.
But he is actually quite tall man. Yeah.
Like every Dutchman, right?
No, but he's particularly kind of like, he's kind of grand.
He's even larger than Dutchman. Yeah, that's my secret theory.
Yeah.
If you're looking for clothes sales in Amsterdam, good luck if you're below 6'2" in size.
Well, the Netherlands is not really a fashion country. That's the other thing.
That's true. Wow.
But I was trying to say about this, that the magazine has a very...
So you're helping the countrymen out with this. They have manners, though. I think they have.
What I want to say is it's also like a pretty kind of personal magazine, in the sense that I want to kind of feature guys in the magazine that I really like myself, or the old heroes or whatever.
Yeah.
And also, the magazine is for a little bit like an older man, or like 30 plus, because all the magazines are all like so focused on youth. And if you're over 30, you get really kind of sick of that. And of course,
that's okay.
It's kind of like it gets under your skin, you know.
No, you're right. I mean, about your comment about the cover, like who's on the cover of the men's magazines now, age-wise? It's almost those 20-something.
It's always models, and that's one thing that the magazine we kind of like don't want to use models for the magazine. I think it's so much, especially with menswear, it's so much more interesting when it's a personality behind it. So it's much more like a personal style magazine than it is let's say a fashion magazine. So we don't really do latest collections. It's more like Anthony the Johnsons we had in the magazine.
Oh, interesting.
And pictures by Ines de Lamsvero. I mean, I think that picture could be the CD cover. I think it's really good. So it's always someone we want to.
So there is a kind of structure to it, though. There are certain recurring elements, I believe, to it. There's sort of a profile feature, and then there's sort of there's a section that's kind of about clothing. Again, it's not really, because every magazine would have like, these are the clothes for the season, or, plaid is it, or whatever, whatever the discourse is would be in it.
We do like 5 big kind of profiles, like very well researched, very well written profiles per issue, and then we combine that mostly with like amazing photography, like very good like full on kind of photography, mostly black and white. It's also something that kind of disappeared from a lot of magazines.
Well, the amount of text here is actually really interesting, especially in the lead, right? I mean, any traditional magazine would only have the upper portion. You know what I mean? And exactly. That's too much, right?
We do kind of like, I love the New Yorker, and you just, you start reading and it like never ends. But it's like, you kind of like, if you read like 8,000 words, you're just kind of like, oh my god, when is it going to stop the story? And it goes on another 5 pages. But in this case, I think most profiles are like 4,000 words. Which is a lot.
Yeah, for a magazine, especially. I mean, okay, yes, this is another profile.
That's how a lot of profiles start, with this kind of spread. And everybody's a Mr. in Fantastic Man.
That doesn't make him sound like a hairdresser or something?
Yeah.
Mr. Oh, wait, is it the last name or is it the first name?
Well, that's kind of like depends. Like this is, in this case, it's Mr. Stefano.
Okay. But you know what I mean? Like
it's a tongue-in-cheek politeness, which everybody like who's going to be featured in the magazine, all like really looking forward to the headline and to be called Mr. And
well, especially like this. I mean, this is like newspaper scale. This could be Figaro.
It's really big. It's like, the magazine title is Fantastic Man, so we kind of celebrate the people we feature.
It's fantastic.
And we do that kind of like, it's a bit like hysterical to kind of open a story with this kind of spread. But that's what I like about it.
It's very promising. So I think this is like would be a section like is this the shoe or is this the foot?
Well, there's a lot of emphasis on product, but that not like what we do is there's a lot of photography that shows like in this case it's a shoot about shoes, but in the context of actually wearing it instead of just having a pair of shoes as a still photo. And it's very much about photography and the way it's all about the whole atmosphere. And what we also do with every issue is that we commission a story about a certain garment. So we're kind of building up a whole library of stories about different aspects of
I don't know if we have that
menswear.
one. Do we have an oh, well, this
Not
is
really.
more like personal style. More like...
This is like
A, B, or C, I guess.
This is the editor of Italian Rolling Stone, Carlo Antonelli. I don't know. This is just his the things he wears. Brought as a kind of like fashion story.
He's looking pretty good in the halter top.
I mean, it's kind of meant to be funny. It's kind of like I don't know. I think he looks good.
No, he does.
He's a very funny person.
Well, I don't know. We'll probably get back to that theme in a minute. I wasn't going to. So no advertising, but.
I don't know. This is like published like so big in a magazine. It's kind of ridiculous. That's what I like about it, because you never look at a cigarette this way. And we did kind of feature about the art of smoking and the disappearance of smoking in the public smoking, so to speak. And this is one of the pages from that story.
Should I turn it because it's making you want to smoke?
Not yet.
He's in America, so he's been forbidden to smoke until he leaves the country. Oh my!
This is Oliver Sam. He's the editor of. God, there's a lot of editors in this selection. This is the editor of Purple Fashion from Paris.
And they willingly subject themselves, yeah.
Oh yeah, this is what he would love to do. He said
in his magazine.
Huh?
He would love to do in his magazine? Or?
No, he can. He does. He kind of appears in his own magazines now and then, but not like in this way that it's like really kind of a series. And he's showing you the latest in underwear, in briefs. And it might sound like kind of ridiculous, but like Olivier is really a playboy in Paris. He's a kind of like, like I said, a contemporary Serge Gainsbourg.
So he's
No, he's always with a woman. He's always has different girlfriends.
But he has the aphrodisiac
of a kind of like ugliness. I don't know what it is. No, it's he's very aware of that. You know how he attracts women. He's also talking about that in the feature.
It's kind of a compelling ugliness, though. It's hard to look away.
I don't know exactly what women really. I don't know.
Train wreck or beauty?
This is a story about Marky Smith of The Fall. Also, someone I really wanted to feature, since I'm like a big Fall fan, and also a big fan of the Smiths, actually.
Yes, we were just this charming man, right? This would be the song.
Oh no, but I once started also the Dutch Smiths fan club back in the 80s. Yeah.
Oh.
And I really wanted to feature Morrissey, but it's like always difficult with Morrissey.
Maybe on the prosthetics issue.
In which issue?
The prosthetics issue. I
don't know what maybe in 2009. I don't know. We'll see. No, we try to get him in the magazine, and he wanted to do it, but it's all like everything with him is very conditional.
Right.
So,
but this is.
So we had Marky Smith from the Fall.
Oh, it is Mr. Smith, but it's very tiny. Does it say Mr. Smith? I can't see it on the screen here, but
it says Mr.
Smith. Okay. Just checking. Let's see if there are consistencies. This is an interesting section. This is like people recommending things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of the opposite. Well, not the opposite, but it's an extension of the buying guide, kind of, right?
It's like it's actually a kind of like almost commercial kind of section. It's like the back section of the magazine. It's like people recommending something, but it's all like again kind of like personal experiences with products. So it's like someone recommends a certain kind of tie from the 70s, or someone recommends a new kind of fragrance, or someone just recommends a new CD, which is also possible, or someone recommends a forgotten book from the 80s, or so it's all kind of like personal recommendations by different kind of people. It's a lot of writers and actually a lot of fashion designers recommending things.
It's oddly compelling. Well, oddly compelling to me, maybe, but because you really get sucked into the story behind it. I mean, it is very personal, and I mean, it's very idiosyncratic. The selection, I think. It's really...
This is Mr. Helmut Lang. He was on the cover of number 4, which was like last season, and this is first. There's a whole story of Helmut Lang because he sold his company to Prada, and didn't speak to the press for almost 2 years, and then he had this kind of like, let's say, coming out kind of interview in Fantastic Man, what exactly happened and what's going on.
How did you get this cover photo? Is it spontaneous or is it more art directed?
This cover, it's hardly art directed. It's shot by Bruce Weber. And I mean, if you're working with big photographers, it's kind of difficult to art direct them. To say like, I want Helmut Lang with a black rooster on the cover. Like, I mean, you're not going to say that. It's more like
he has some farm animals. Yeah. They may appear in the scene.
I did ask him to.
Well, it's really bad because it's like a man and his cock, right? I mean,
it's a lot of homosexuals are saying, "Oh my God, it's Helmut hugging a black cock," but. But there were also like, a lot of people that read that picture in a completely different way. It's like so sensual.
Yes, it can be read in a very innocent way.
Yeah. Well, at least Helmut himself could also like really laugh about it. I thought it was really funny. But maybe it's interesting to kind of tell something about it. Like,
yeah, no.
Because I'm more like, if I'm like commissioning things like this, then in this case, because it's Bruce Weber, you know, for Christ's sake. So I'm kind of telling what I don't want.
Yeah.
I hate like sunglasses and pictures and hats, and you really want to see someone, and especially when someone's a little bit older, then you don't want to get too close up. And I'm kind of like, no, it's true. It's absolutely true. There's also a lot of people I've found with a lot of photographers that have kind of like problems of shooting. They only want to shoot people that are or like really young, you know,
right,
or like really old and kind of like, you know, interesting to look again because because of the wrinkles, because of, you know,
But the story itself, though, how did you get the story? Because this.
Helmut did a contribution to Bud magazine. We already been talking with him for a long time.
Oh, okay.
He's been like he has advertised in the magazine, and we always get like from his assistant emails that like, oh, I love the new issue and this and this. So and when we launched the first issue, then we immediately got an email from him and saying like, oh, please FedEx every new issue to me. And I'm a really big fan of Helmut Lang.
Yeah.
And the magazine Fantastic Man, maybe it's also a good thing to say, like the more personal aspect. For me, it's also a magazine that's I'm not that much of a fashion person. I mean, I have interest in fashion, but more when it's like clothes and not when it's like the latest thing, or you know, I don't have that interest in fashion. It's really seasonal. It's just. So for me, starting a fashion magazine is also a kind of like a personal kind of journey. There's a lot of like personal things in it, like what kind of shoes should I wear, you know? I don't really feel like sneakers anymore, but I also don't want to wear this kind of really formal kind of shoes. So then I would do a story about shoes. Or if I want to buy.
So it's also personal research or something.
It's kind of personal research. And when we started a magazine, and we use Gert Jonkers, he's a journalist. Also make Bud magazine with him. We do Fantastic Man together. That's the kind of way when we started the magazine, we kind of thought about it that way, and that's what we still do. You know, like being very close to yourself. Also, if you're kind of like turning a little bit older, then you don't want to look like a skater anymore, or you don't want to dress up like you're really young. But you also don't want to dress up like really formally, or really formal. So the magazine's a little bit about that kind of adventure.
So it's a kind of a search, though, for like, you know, the perfect shirt or that kind of thing.
And then I'm also starting to buy white shirts myself. or actually, it started with me buying white shirts and then asking myself, what's a good white shirt? And then I kind of like commission stories.
So you get to keep the samples.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, the good thing about working in fashion is that. And especially the menswear world, it's a kind of like really small world, and we get a lot of presents. And you kind of like, and you get like, if you're part of that system, you get so much material. You get so much like press material, and everybody wants to be in your magazine, and you get invited to dinners and making trips, and it's kind of nice.
What does it perk? So if any of you are thinking about starting magazines, think carefully about the subject matter.
Exactly. Well, for instance, don't start a magazine for homosexuals.
Could you get this?
You get this, and you don't get anything. No, I'm not talking about all the kind of like freebies you get when you're making a fashion magazine. It's more that a lot of times you get, things that also kind of interesting.
Yeah. So,
but. And then your question is going to be, so how do you start a magazine?
So how did you start Bud?
Well, we just started because there was nothing out there like Bud. And
was it a personal research again? Different kind of personal
yes and
research?
no, because I loved Straight to Hell, the magazine from New York that that didn't exist anymore since the 80s, or since the 90s, which is a magazine with like they call themselves true homosexual experiences. It's all like sex stories. It's all like stories that really happened and in full detail. So it's a kind of like porn magazine, but textual porn magazine, which is really interesting. Opposed to like erotic fiction, which is it's terrible. Because you feel like the story's being made up. And I was very inspired by Straight to Hell for its kind of textual kind of content. And I don't know, we wanted to just create a magazine we were dying to read ourselves. There was nothing that kind of represented an other kind of like... there was no other kind of representation of being gay. And I thought it was kind of stupid because... especially at that time, we're talking about in 2001, you really, as a gay, you really felt uncool. You really felt like a kind of like a target group of a deodorant. And no, because it's so kind of, in gay magazines, you're so targeted as a consumer. And then, in my work in general, I just kind of like want to create magazines that don't talk to you as a consumer. And with the gay magazines, it became... almost a parody, I think.
Do you think they become a kind of consumer, though? Like once it starts, a different kind of consumer?
Sorry, I didn't get
like consuming the magazine, as opposed to being a demographic, to be able to consume the magazine itself,
I think it's really hard with a lot of gay magazines to actually consume the magazine because there's hardly anything to read. No, you have to, I'm very negative about it just because like most of those magazines are also for free.
Right.
So it's only like a kind of like almost mathematical kind of relationship between the advertisers and the magazine. And it's kind of sad, the kind of like, also the kind of marketing that a lot of like gay bars have to do to still kind of attract people because around the time 2001, there was also a decline in people that actually would go out, people were meeting each other online, and that's something that's still going on. So the whole gay scene was also kind of changing because of that. And I just missed that there was nothing like nothing felt anymore like a community. Nothing felt anymore like an exchange of information. Like we had nothing in common.
I think
and when we kind of thought about what do we have in common, we thought like let's make a sex magazine. as simple as that,
We'll talk about a sex magazine. This is really slow tonight.
It's kind of like these are kind of friends I photographed in my own place.
It says
at Friday night. We never make up titles. We always say what it is. That's the other thing. That's what I do in all my magazines.
Yeah, that's the great thing. If you pay attention to the headline or the titles.
The titles, the head titles, always.
They're very blunt but usually very effective in a way that you don't get out of the typical sort of copywriting schools. This was another early issue?
This is an early issue. This is number 6. Yeah. This is my friend Heinz-Peter Kness from Berlin. But this picture was taken, he does a lot of self-portraits. This picture was taken when he was like 20 or something. He still keeps all those kind of like, this kind of like self-portraits in his work, like even when he was 16, he has self-portraits.
So how old would he be in this time frame?
He's 37.
37.
Yeah, I think, or even 38 or something. But he still kind of looks the same. It's kind of amazing. He doesn't age. So we kind of started Blvd magazine really, really small. Like we had an edition of 750, and it immediately kind of became successful in the fashion world. Also because we had Bernd Wilhelm, the fashion designer, in the first issue. So it's really got picked up in the fashion world quite.
I think they've been reading.
Exactly. The headlines also like. If you start a magazine, then you kind of like try to develop it. So it takes a little bit of time to actually get everything right, and when it really comes together. I think with Blvd magazine we worked for 9 months before it was there, before we really felt like, okay, everything is a Q&A. That's very important to know, of course, in the magazine, is that it's not it's a magazine that only does Q&A interviews, very open.
Right,
It always
right.
wants to connect different kind of subjects, different kind of aspects of one person. So it could be about the fact that someone did psychotherapy and his love for oranges and his kind of unremarkable sex life, and we kind of connect. It's always very important that we connect different things in one interview.
Or their precocious sex life.
Yeah. Or I know it's a very kind of it's not a sexually explicit magazine. It's much more sexually honest. We hardly do any kind of hard-ons or anything. It's much more soft. It's a little bit like Playboy in a way.
Well, that's funny because the joke that comes to mind when I first saw this was that the joke that I get Playboy for the articles.
Exactly.
And it's sort of true that you kind of fall into these questions. These interviews are really kind of amazing, and of course the subjects are completely wide-ranging. Right.
Well, we always try to feature a real true diversity of different types of men. We always want to have one person that's kind of let's say, famous, next to someone that's always that's kind of completely unknown. And there's a kind of blue-collar job, like the gardener, and we had a farmer,
a trash collector or something in one. Yeah.
In the new issue, we have. We also have someone that's, I don't remember right now, but there's always and then there's always people that older guys, younger guys, people from America, guys from Germany or from Morocco or from Thailand. They come from everywhere. So, and I think it's really interesting to have the diversity together with let's say the representation of different kinds of different body types.
You're right. Yeah.
So we do chubby because I'm personally completely not turned on by a muscular kind of zero fat kind of body, and the only answer there is from gay culture is the bear, which is for the people who don't know, it's something like this actually.
Speaking of body types,
it's the big kind of the big hairy guy.
I know, we have to do a glossary for tonight's lecture, or lexicon for tonight's lecture.
So we do chubby guys, really thin guys.
Well, this is really amazingly radical, though. I mean, we kind of gloss over this, but you won't. I mean, you can have the subcultural, signs, the bears and the cubs and the twing. I mean, there's all of these sort of subcultures, but to have them together in one space, I think, is really unusual.
Yeah, because that's the other thing with the magazine. It's not included into, let's say, the official gay world. It's never been picked up in the gays. It's never embraced by the gay scene, because when people are part of a certain kind of subculture within a kind of subculture, they tend to take it extremely serious. People who have a fetish, they don't have any irony about it. They don't have any kind of humor about it. And if you bring all those people together, I mean, the bears are not buying it because it's not a bear magazine.
Oh, right. Yeah,
so there's other people who buy that, who can enjoy actually, a twink next to a bear. And it's usually not a twink and not a bear. That's what I want to say. We thought the magazine would be embraced by the gay scene, but it was embraced by the fashion people.
That's interesting. It says stuff.
Yeah, it's stuff.
I don't know how many people misread it, but there were.
So porn stars,
well, the other thing is the
ethnicities,
though. The mix of cultures, though. That's the other big radical move, because within gay culture, I mean, maybe it's different in the Netherlands, but I think in the U.S., it's very, it suffers from a lot of, xenophobia of its own. I mean, there's tension between, African American, gay experience versus sort of, white middle class gay experience. Although that's starting to erode, but growing up, that's what I encountered a lot of. So to see this all in one space is different.
And also that kind of extreme correctness that comes with that,
Right.
It's kind of good intention combined with an extremely kind of commercial aspect makes it kind of nasty in a way.
Well, if it's
kind of
inauthentic, yeah.
Huh?
inauthentic, like kind of a formula.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know. I just I think with all my magazines I make, I'm very aware of not having too good intentions with the things you do. I mean, this headline and stuff already kind of like gives a little bit of pretext that the guy has nothing to say, and he was also fine with it. You know, most people are kind of. It sounds kind of ridiculous, but you know what I mean. It's. I don't want to treat the people I feature like.
It's not a parody.
It's not a parody. It's not like. And that's the other thing as well. I mean. And these are also all the things we were thinking of when starting the magazine, is that we don't want to feature people at the moment. They have something to sell. They have a new perfume out in the case of Marc Jacobs, or have a new CD out, or there's a theater play. You know, because people tend to give exactly the same interviews. You're going to talk about a fragrance, like how interesting that it has a note of this and this and that. You know, and you read exactly the same text you can read back somewhere else. So. We kind of try to capture people when they are a little bit more vulnerable, and the moment they don't want to do press, in a way, you know, and you get a different story out of them. So
when they're PR handlers or away.
Exactly. I mean, the PR we always try to skip. I mean, for Bud, we never interviewed a guy through a press agent.
Yeah.
It's always through the back door. It's always that we knew that person liked the magazine, or. That we were close to the assistant of, or you know what I mean? It's
right.
Yeah.
Well, and the results show, I think. There's also like a bit of history in it too, like a recurring figures from the past, kind of. You know, the former porn director, or. You know, an actor, a retired fashion designer. There's this element. It's not nostalgic at all, but it's really interesting, I think.
But we try to reconnect with like pre-AIDS period.
Yeah.
Because I thought that because I do think that after AIDS, the whole gay scene got so much emancipated, and especially in Europe, where you can marry and everything, and became completely correct. You know, the next step for gays would be to become straight, because they already have the same lifestyles. So I just.
Well, I think there's some straight people that are gay. So.
I kind of think it's a bit like nostalgic to kind of like go back to those people who were actually making the scenery alive in the 70s, where guys would look different, would look more masculine, for instance, or there was another kind of sense of what's fun, you know, what's a party, like, what's sexy.
Right. Well, do you see that coming back now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's coming back. It's coming back. You know, you can suppress people for a long time, and some people really take it in, you know, some kind of oppression, things you cannot do, like in America, like public sex completely disappeared, of course, and that's kind of like re-emerging all the time.
Yeah. In our sculpture garden.
Yeah, in the sculpture garden.
We haven't updated our tapes in quite a long time, our security tapes in quite a long time.
Well, Americans are very good at defining themselves, of course. So, so as long as it doesn't have a kind of category, it doesn't really exist. So, but you can say like, okay, the hair is growing back again. You know, like, if you talk with some kind of hipster in New York, then it would immediately be like, oh yeah, vintage porn, of course, yeah, ugh, the new porn's horrible, you know. So it was like, oh yeah, oh shave, no, don't shave, you know, like, really like a bush on a guy or something. So that's like kind of like it is kind of changing. It's kind of like political correct, and it all circles not to kind of, you know, to say like, even if people have a six pack themselves, they say like, ugh, six packs, they're kind of, you know. That's definitely going on. So yes, there is a change, I think, in what people like and what people do.
Do you see yourself intimately involved in that change, or do you think you're reflecting it?
Yeah, because it started really small, and it's now kind of big, and I actually come across like in a lot of websites. If I kind of Google it up and see where people are talking about it, and it's kind of it became kind of influential. Yeah.
It's
very stupid to say about it yourself, but you know, I'm just amazed a little bit about the skill.
Yeah.
And we have been, you know, we had so much press as well. And the amount of email we get, you know, we mostly, but you make a magazine that you don't get any email. Because don't people, because that's a different thing also with Bud, it's more like, it is a kind of community and it is a kind of group of people that also kind of like, there's a real exchange between people who read the magazine. We have like a lot of guys that are posted on our website with a picture and...
Yeah, we were talking about that the other day, that the, you know, sometimes in magazines you can tell from the letters to the editor. Sometimes it's very few, and sometimes you know they're actually constructed to kind of. Fill space.
Yeah. When I was making Blvd magazine, we'd never get a letter, so we'd write them ourselves. You know? And there's a lot of magazines that do that.
Yeah. Like, why did you do or the glowing letters? Probably the glowing letters here. I think I'm always suspicious of those. But.
Yeah. Just don't trust them. But we also do, we kind of know who reads the magazine. We also do like 4 parties a year or something. We kind of we did a huge one like for 1,200 people in New York last December, and we kind of escaped that party ourselves because we didn't find it was so much fun. Like so busy, and it was not on the right scale. But so we kind of after that kind of stopped it for now. But we might do a big thing during Gay Pride in New York again. Some kind of like. More like a gay rock kind of concert together with a kind of art film night. So it's a kind of like parallel kind of festival next to...
Right, like a satellite program.
Yeah, right.
And I forget who this is.
This is Edmund White.
Oh, right.
As the writer Edmund White as a pinup, almost.
He's trapped.
He's trapped, but he wanted to be trapped. I mean, you don't see the headline. You don't see the headline of this article, but it was like famous writer wants to have sex with everybody.
Right.
That's what he was talking about in the interview. He just wants to, you know, it doesn't matter. Everybody.
Everybody.
This is a guy who started emailing us from Vermont, and he really wanted to be photographed.
Yeah. So it's this more anonymous person in the celebrity.
Yeah, it's an anonymous person. I interviewed him in the magazine, and no, he's really nice. And kind of sexy. What's after this?
Our computer is slow.
This is the book.
The book. So, now, how did you figure out the cover?
Well, that's the thing. We were shooting a cover. We edited this book with Wolfgang Tillmans, the photographer and artist. Mm-hmm. And he was going to shoot a cover. Right. But if he has to really shoot things for a certain kind of context, it just doesn't come out.
It doesn't work.
He hates commission work. If he knows that it's going to be the cover of a book, you know...
It doesn't work for him.
It doesn't work that way for him, no. So we had different sessions and just, you know... And then we said like, okay, well, why don't we just use this
This is from one of the issues.
This is from a former issue. And it kind of sums it up, you know. Does it? I'm thinking
a little cold.
I don't know. It's also that kind of like.
We have to imagine it's cold. I guess we could see it.
It's a kind of a chubby guy. It's kind of like it's also kind of funny. It's like in the kitchen. I don't know.
It's very unsanitary. I don't think.
Yeah. It is.
We're having a little delay with our computer. Sorry. It was flying this afternoon. Oh, Re. So Re was the first magazine that you did, and
yeah.
And well, I know there's a story behind this. So the whole genesis of Re. We're actually looking at a little bit. Re is more thematic, or it started out to be thematic.
Well, it started out to be let's say, a thesis project at the postgraduate school. But one I kind of continued after graduation. So the idea was to basically create a magazine as more like a personal platform, like a testing ground. Like, how could I make a magazine as being a designer? So I would write and edit, do the photography, everything myself. And the idea was to create a kind of besides a personal platform, also to create a magazine that would kind of represent the kind of daily life experience, or the poetry of the everyday. Or so for the first issue, I only interviewed friends and tried to get kind of like get a kind of conversation out of them that would like be beyond what we normally would talk about. So it's also kind of a part of a kind of generation. It's like in between 25 and 30. At the moment, there's a lot of happening with people at that age. Because they have the first big house, or they have the first career, or that, you know. So, and then the kind of magazine kind of moved on where I would more have the role of art director and editor. And designer, of course, always in the end.
Right.
But I would like ask other people to shoot things for me and kind of build up a network of photographers and writers I was working with. And it was really difficult to get it right, you know, to find the right kind of writers or find the right kind of like tone of voice when you don't know that much about text. That sounds like ridiculous, but I just did. I like the aspect of just doing things and kind of like growing up in public. It's maybe also one of the reasons why I don't have any visual materials of the first 3 issues on my laptop. I just don't have it. You know
At
what I
all.
mean? I'm not at all. So I never show it because first I'm a bit ashamed of it. Secondly, no, it's true. And secondly, it's just, you know, very much a learning kind of experience more than...
Right. Well, it's very you're trying to do everything.
Yeah.
And you're trying to learn everything
Yeah.
too. I mean, maybe the design is there, but the editing, function, the writing, the tone of voice, the photography.
The translations. I mean, that's the other thing, you know.
It was in English, yeah.
Yeah, there's like, because a lot of texts are going from like English from Dutch to English. And I know I've read some interviews back, and it's
Didn't quite work.
No.
So of course, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is that this is the. I think for this one, well, in the later ones too, with Reed, they're very much about a person, but the face shot on the cover. I mean, in magazine world, you know, this is almost always has to be a celebrity. It's like if anyone's figured out Vanity Fair yet, you know, like Vanity Fair, like content's interesting, but you know, it's always Brad Pitt on the cover. And they always try to find a way to put Brad Pitt on the cover. Like they found a way in the art issue to put him on the cover. It's like, I mean, it's like impossible, but it always is driven by this kind of idea of celebrity. And of course, if you're in everyday life, I mean, there isn't much celebrity in that way, media celebrity.
No. Well, I just also like the kind of like almost oppositional kind of role the cover would play like in the newsstands. Because at the time already made a lot
in the
other
context of all this,
in the context
yeah.
of, but that's what Re magazine is about, you know. And a lot of issues that kind of play with the fact that it's media, it's media also about media, and it's kind of like playing a little bit of contextual kind of game. This is often a boring issue. That's an issue that kind of like explore the notions of boredom and having, you know, the moment you have nothing to do and actually start to stare at things, and what comes out of staring, what comes out of. Although the whole issue is a little bit more wide, it's not like very kind of one theme that's kind of like over-explained. It's more. I tried to kind of create a little bit more freedom of having different experiments in the magazine and different kind of material. But those first issue, this was the first issue that I kind of relaunched the magazine, because I was making other magazines before.
Right.
After the first 3, so I kind of relaunched the magazine as a kind of like, let's say, a glossy. It had a different.
Yeah.
It had a different kind of. Amount of pages, had a different feel. It was much more a real magazine. And I worked like almost a year on creating a structure, you know, like starting a foundation, having a distributor, getting the finances together, getting some advertising. Also in that boring issue, there were a few advertisers like Levi's paid a lot, and Adidas, as I say. And so when I had the kind of structure in place, and also the kind of people I wanted to make, I had like an editorial board and everything. Then I kind of started to redo it, and twice a year was the idea.
Did you have to have prepared the demographic for the magazine if you're selling advertising space?
Yeah, but it's something. There was a girl working for me. She just did that, you know. So now she just would make some kind of like media kit. which has a rate card and kind of stuff. Yeah, but it's kind of simple, especially for because people that make magazines, they kind of try to get a hold of the media kits of other magazines.
Yeah.
So if you know what's in the media kit, and it's everybody saying the same thing, we're a very influential group of readers in this kind of, they all work in the communication industries and and blah 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 blah. It's especially for these kind of magazines that are more like experimental, they all claim the same thing basically. So it's also like I do feel that for a lot of independent magazines, advertising feels also as a way of sponsoring.
Right. Well, which we can.
Yeah.
We were noticing the cover of this one. This was done in
2002. It was like a future issue. It was published in 2002 as a kind of, as it is like now, spring 2007.
It is as of a few days ago.
Yeah.
So how close? Not very.
How close? I mean.
Oh, in the future orientation of it, is there anything?
It's a kind of therapy thing. Where were you 5 years ago? Where are you now? And where do you want to be in 5 years?
It's the job interview from hell, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself?
Yeah, it's a horrible question.
Not here.
It's like people have to
That's always the answer.
But it's an issue that's also made after September 11 and kind of responds to that. It's all like a collection. It's like a recollection of the history in order to kind of formulate a kind of possible future. And that's what this issue does.
Yeah, I remember when it came out, I was thinking, oh my God, 2007, who knows? I mean,
but it's also really confusing, I think.
So far away.
No, exactly, but also I still have that. In the 90s, you could kind of build up to something, and after 2000, it sounds for me really weird. 2017, 2011, it sounds like endless. And in 2000, probably this is made in 2000 or written in 2001. It almost felt like camp 2007. Like, no, that's not going to happen. It's going to be the end of the world.
Could have been after 2001. Let's see. And then the magazine shifts, right? It becomes more about a single person.
Yeah, because we were, by that time, I tried all different kinds of way of working with different people. Mm-hmm. Like I worked as a collective. That was like kind of black issue you saw, the information trash can. Right. Like extremely democratic. Everybody had like an equal voice. Well, not in the end, of course, but and all the processes were always really kind of difficult, especially when you're writing a whole kind of like future issue. It's like a writing job, and I found myself more like in the position of a writer than of an editor.
Kind of like a novel or something. Like
almost
a
like a novel. I know right now what it is to write a novel.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of a hurtful process, writing, I think. I don't know any writer who says, I love writing.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I love write up a story and have a new book.
Could do it all day long.
Like reconnecting things and stories within stories, and I hate it. I'm really not enjoying that.
Yeah.
So,
well, typically magazines breaking everything down into smaller pieces so it can be accomplished, right? But then don't you run into the same problem with this, like these kind of confabulations of a person, like John?
Well, it seems
kind of like you have to imagine their whole life, though, right?
Well, that's the other thing, because it kind of ended up with one guy, artist, and a theater maker, Arnold Holleman, and we became both editors. Okay. And he did with this. I know that's not completely true, but we kind of like both were writing, but he did most of the editing afterwards. Okay. So I could just like bang out like a lot of text, and he would kind of like kind of edit them down into a kind of like. He's also very good in that kind of work. So we thought it would be easier to create a magazine that's about one person, so that one person becomes the voice of, let's say, the editors, rather than so we could do more specific kind of research instead of having a kind of abstract notion, you're going to explore like boredom. What is that?
But at the same time, it's also constructed.
It's extremely constructed, extremely so.
Which is, I was trying to figure out. Oh, like Claudia, do you want to explain?
Claudia is a woman of 2 meters tall, which comes down to 6'5" or 8.
It must be taller than that, almost 7 feet, right?
6'8" then. That's
6'8", yeah. So
and she's also a fictional woman.
she's like posited as like is it the world's tallest supermodel?
She?
Yeah. Would she be that? No.
No, she's a graphic designer from Berlin.
Okay.
But she's
well, she in the picture, yes. She in the story.
But she's actually that tall, yeah. But she's an Uber woman. She's extremely successful, extremely beautiful, extremely intelligent, and extremely tall, and extreme, and she's like bigger than the world. So in a way, but she's like too good to be true, of course. So and she's talking about her job as a personal coach, and it's a job to kind of like train people who are not that tall to at least feel that tall. So the whole story is like 5 interviews, and every interview she talks about another kind of aspect about her fabulousness. So in the end, she becomes really intimidating and a real monster. So she's a kind of like a metaphor in a way. I mean, that's the way we saw it, as a, like media and the intimidation of media, and when you always feel wrong, even if you're right. So, but it's an extremely funny issue.
It is. So this isn't the prototype for Fantastic Woman?
A little bit. I mean, you already kind of feel that it has a lot to do right now in this kind of period. You already feel that the Fantastic Man's coming up in a way. I mean, this could also be in a way almost a cover for a Fantastic Man,
or kind of like maybe Bud in a way.
Yeah.
This is Marcel.
Yeah. Well, this is the issue where we kind of experimented with fiction and also real, because the guy's an actor. His real name is Marcel. He's a kind of like, let's say, a celebrity in the Netherlands, and he runs his theater group and he's a lot of TVs. The theater group actually makes TV programs, which are kind of funny. And this issue deals with food or food paranoia. He's someone who's like kind of like losing a lot of weight and gaining a lot of weight, and in this issue, in the fictitious character of Marcel, he's kind of like enjoying that. He's kind of enjoying to really use his body as a vehicle for experimentation, doing like combining 6 diets in one time, or overeating till you faint, and the way we constructed the issue is that it's like 3 big monologues that are all like kind of what it involves a lot of like contradictory kind of theories about food. Like in one theory, coffee is really good for you,
right?
And the other one is like really bad, and in the third one it's like your death. So it's really interesting to put those together and let them kind of almost like explode. That's what's happening in this issue.
Which of course exists out in the world, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And this issue was also a theater play, which kind of toured.
A theater play.
Yeah. So people would get an issue after the play.
Oh, interesting. It's a kind of food dysphoria.
Well, we kind of wrote also the monologues as a theater text. So.
Okay. So it could be acted. Are we at the end? Do you think?
I think this is the end.
The end of those slides. We had something else for your entertainment.
Yeah.
This one, right? You launch this.
If you.
There we go.
Does it work automatically?
It should, yes.
Yeah, there
it goes. So these are
the exclusive preview of the new issue of Bud. Right now at the printer. It's going to be presented in a week in LA, actually.
Where you're off to next, right?
Where I'm off to next, and we're going to do We're going to invite people that are on the website. There's like 50 people online on the website from LA. We invite them, and they can pick up the copy of a new issue.
Sorry, I get sucked into looking at all of this. That's a great shot.
This one?
Yeah.
It's a little almost like the Bee Gees.
Yeah.
This is like almost like too much, that double page spread. Anyways.
I know, it's hard to pull yourself away from this. It's hard to pull yourself away
I'm
from
all
this.
the time looking at the screen and not at the audience.
I know. Well, we can't see you
audience.
either, so we can only hear you. But
Right.
in the write-up to this evening's conversation in our local alternative paper, describing the event, the first line said, Jop van Bennekom, designer, editor, publisher, is this the dream job or is this the nightmare? And
Well, it's a bit of a nightmare. No, because there's so much. I don't know. It's really nice to kind of like. I work quite hard, actually.
But they're all staggered, obviously, right? These publications, or what is the? I mean, you're doing 3 at once. It seems almost impossible, right?
Well,
They're
it's
all
just
in
kind of
different
like, I mean, Re-Magazine didn't come out for 2 years. That's
Right.
the whole reason as well. Because it's too much, and it's also like for Re-Magazine, you're going to see the Depression issue. That was the kind of the latest issue of Re-Magazine. I kind of also knew that was still going to be the last issue. So for the theme was really kind of appropriate. And no, but the publisher went bankrupt, so it was really difficult to continue it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, for magazines, there's of course no funding.
Right.
Even not in the Netherlands.
How could that be?
Yeah, how could
they
that be,
funded
yeah.
everything.
And it's really difficult to get the right distribution. Advertising is kind of impossible. So if you do it, you have to do a lot of other kind of stuff to make it possible. That's why I started. I knew that Re-Magazine was kind of like ending at that time. So that's also one of the reasons I also started Fantastic Man. The first issue of Fantastic Man came out like 3 months after.
After it.
Yeah.
Because it seems like you can see, looking back at some issues of some of the, these ideas coming forward in the other publications in a way. So it's, in some ways it's too bad that it's not, it's kind of more the most kind of undefined in terms of, because I guess it's longer, it's been around longer, so it's evolved more than some of these. Do you see these? Actually, we're in Fantastic Man. I was curious about the advertising. Actually, I mean, you can tell right away from the magazines like how much advertising support there is. Obviously, fashion. There's more than.
Well, they like it. I mean, in fashion, they do like things that are an alternative. It's not like they're opposed to it, or they're very open for the new because that's what it's all about. So. But I am kind of amazed about the support, because an ad is a lot of money, so and it almost feels like a present.
Do we have the rate card? We don't have the rate
I can tell you. I mean, the double page spread is like 8,000 euros.
Yeah.
So that's
more
almost
now.
$11,000.
Yeah. These are great. Is this the owner of Chateau Marmont? Yeah.
And the boyfriend of Uma Thurman, although they just broke up.
Will you be staying there in Los Angeles?
No, but I'm actually staying at the Standard, which is also one of his hotels.
Yeah.
It was such a coincidence.
So this is.
Oh no, they were kind of cool about it because we were going to feature André Belasov because he has like the Mercer in New York, he has the Standard hotels, but they wanted to advertise, but they did not want to advertise. That was before we featured him. They wanted to advertise, but they did not want to put their ad in the issue where André Belasov was also in, so they did not want to lose.
No
it looks like kind
synergy.
of a promotional. That's also kind of not done.
Be good.
Not always, but.
So
but hey.
Just went to Again, I'm distracted by. I think one of the things that ties all the magazines together, at least in my mind, is this idea, this tension or duality between realism and fantasy. And they're not exactly opposites, I don't think, in there. You know, we talked a little bit about how you're constructing this sort of real portrait, or you're trying to come at the idea of reality. But like even through the early photography, like with the architecture magazine, et cetera, it's still very much a constructed image. Are you very conscious of this kind of duality between sort of realism and fantasy?
Yeah, yes and no, because I think with photography, I'm not usually not the one who's making the picture, so you have to give it a little bit of space.
But in the whole like,
but I do always build a construct
sense.
where the photography fits in.
Yeah.
You know, I always create a kind of context where the photography works. You know, so it's always based on an idea, and then the photography kind of follows that idea, which is very different than what most magazines do. It's the way I make magazines. It's very curated. It's very kind of precise.
Right.
It's like the combination of people together, the combination of different kind of photography.
No, it feels.
It's
very
very disciplined.
like
No, it's very. It's very much designed. Also the
so great.
the Montana. It's a. Maybe we should go back to it. It's kind of.
I don't know if
I'm still amazed that we even got to publish this image of, you know, which feels like you know, an advertisement of everything that's wrong with male plastic surgery. It's like one of those
it's almost parody.
Like,
isn't it? Yeah.
it's like it's a parody, but it's like it's real. I mean, that's the image we got, and it's like highly retouched as well. You know, so it's a kind of oh my god kind of moment. So the photography. No, I was kind of asked myself, like, can you also be against fiction or against fantasy magazines? I kind of like, I'm really kind of opposed to it. The kind of idea, like, you know, let's go to Morocco and shoot a fashion shoot. Like, let's go there and like create a story. And then there's like no story. There's just like models, like board models with some clothes on. I just don't see the point of that. And it's also with a lot of things also in fashion, like if people don't know what to do, they kind of like start to pose really weird or get it like, or kind of create this kind of like sexual tension between models and that whole thing. I mean, that's like 99% of fashion is that way. So yeah, I just tried to...
I think it was like a remarkable story in this issue of the mannequins and the originals. It's like another one.
I mean, that's a little bit like that's why I put it in, because it plays with that idea of the real and let's say the unreal.
Unreal real, or and
I don't know. I mean, I started out with snapshot photography, which I took myself. And it's just that far that snapshot photography takes you. So I became like way more like inclusive over the years and started to kind of work with different kind of photography. And when I started Brilliant Magazine, I was kind of radical at that time to say like, okay, let's go black and white.
Right.
Because I was always a little bit opposed to black and white as not being real enough. But then again, at the same time, like, the printing cost of everything kind of like, and also with digital printing, the prices went down and everything became full color, you know?
Right.
Which is also like this hyper realistic world of you can Google everything up and everything's kind of transparent and the security cameras on all the street corners. That kind of whole culture was kind of interesting when there's, again, a kind of like almost abstract notion of a black and white world where things are.
Well, it's interesting how you say, you know, like black and white is, I think, perceived as being more real, though, even though it's...
Oh really?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I don't know. By me, at least, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, there's some kind of, like, lost authenticity to it or something. Like,
yeah, which I kind of, like,
I
sometimes refer to, in this series, for instance, or something. That's, like, almost this kind of, like, old-fashioned photography.
But then it's always under, I mean, like here yellow, right? And then in but pink, and it's like, then it starts talking about color in a different way, I think. And, in the way that you're saying about, full color, cheapness of full color printing, and how do you make it
How do you make it something else, yeah. How do you make it into into a coherent kind of statement?
Or like this series here is another good example. It's like kind of mimicking.
It's like stock photography being rephotographed with someone who is really depressed. So if you're looking for pictures that with a theme depression, you get these kind of images. So it's like mimicking almost.
Right.
It's kind of if you think about it, it's kind of like difficult. Like
it's like a set of mirrors.
It's a kind of set of mirrors of like So that's our work. I'm almost unconscious of it, to be completely honest.
Really?
I mean, how they function, what those ideas are. Like questioning media should never really be only, a subject in itself, because then it becomes too apparent. So you always have to find another kind of way of talking about things, or
right. I think that's
kind of language.
It kind of moves beyond the critique, though, and becomes much more interesting in and of itself.
Oh, absolutely, and also when it includes aesthetics,
right.
There's nothing more boring than unsexy theory, which doesn't do anything with
or unillustrated theory.
Yeah. Well, that's why nobody reads text in art catalogs.
Don't say that.
Sorry.
We trick them. We have. No.
I don't know.
We'll work on our headline writing, I think.
Well, if you don't put any kind of text in an art catalog, everybody say like, "Hey, where's the text?"
Exactly. It seems
so. We're very conditioned with not getting, any value when there's no text. So, but I kind of like what I'm doing with my magazines. I try to kind of almost force people to read, because if you don't read, there's not very much to get. And like with Magazine, every issue, you kind of have to read it from the beginning to the end to really get what's going on in the magazine. So.
And that's also, there's a shift in the formats too of when it was kind of before it became sort of glossy. Like it's like more newspapery.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has it's a different kind of, many people have commented already on the size of it. Mm-hmm. Like why this particular, it's roughly this size. Yeah.
It's
you can tell.
Well, it's a one-hand read. That was the first idea, And the book is kind of like, it's a different story, but
your hand might fall asleep.
It's handy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of intimate, of course, and it's kind of
Well,
it's kind of personal format. It's also like the amount of pages is like always like around 70 or something, so it's not. But then also, like, there's 70 pages, most of them are all, like, contents. There's a lot to read,
Well, then I think we can wrap it up. But I think the final question might be, is there something next if Re has gone away and, you can do 3 magazines? Mm-hmm. Is there another one? Is there any topic that might, or does it evolve just organically out of one from the other?
There's nothing really organic about starting a magazine. Mm-hmm. Or I think the only organic kind of like way of starting a magazine is if you're very naive and you're in graduate school and you aren't actually starting one. So I've been thinking that maybe if Taschen is the last magazine I have started just because you kind of know what kind of hassle it is. And you know how kind of difficult it is to get a magazine where you want it to be, even if you start it and you don't know where it's going to be, Right. So you take yourself every time over a kind of over your kind of expectations, which is a kind of a very nice thing. So you end up in places you never thought you would end up,
but
both creatively as physically. Right. Let's say having dinner with people that you would never dream of meeting, and
exactly.
And that's of course the very interesting kind of. Aspect of it. But it's more like when I started magazines, you know, I was like extremely naive with starting them. But then you kind of like build your own kind of vocabulary with the magazine. So for me, it's completely logical to combine text and write text myself and headlines myself in combination with design and with a kind of photography.
Right.
So all those three fields of me are so interconnected.
Right.
So if we're going to start another kind of magazine, you could kind of feel or see that it's...
Well, they're all like genre busting in a way. I mean, they're all sort of critiques of their own genres in a way, or how they don't fit into the genres. I mean, are there any, maybe you don't have to do, are there any genres that you look to and say, this is, or is it almost everything? Because it's
we get so many people saying, "Oh, we would love that magazine of Fantastic Woman would exist." Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who would love to have a straight version of Bud. There is already a lesbian version of Bud, but that's another story. I don't know. It's more that I would love to continue remagazine in some kind of way. Mm-hmm. It would be called differently, and it would have like more maybe like a format, so it's more like, let's say, doable actually creating that magazine. Mm-hmm. I also would kind of like to. It's kind of difficult thing, or a dangerous thing to say, but I also would love to do something mainstream. It's for like a huge audience instead of an exclusive kind of group of readers.
Maybe redesigning something then, or launching?
Yeah, but people don't really ask me.
Well,
no, people don't ask me because I do know that my magazine's always, you know, on the mood board of Condé Nast and you know, and
for all the good it does.
I don't know. I've written the press release for the first issue of Fantastic Man myself, and when I read the press release of Men's Vogue America, there were literally sentences taken out of the press release, our press release, into their press release, and then I knew, like, listen, come on. If you look at the magazine, I could also tell that the whole idea of the magazine, also featuring more real men and more mature and everything. I mean, it also came straight from our magazine.
But not as successful, right?
No, I don't know. They're pretty successful with advertising. That's what it's all about. So that's
well,
fine.
right. I mean, that's the complete inversion.
No, but it would be interesting when, you know, the kind of position I have with my own magazines, I of course would not have with any other magazine, because there would be someone for everything, you know, for every aspect. There would be would be a picture editor and this person. So the most logical thing you can do is become an editor of a magazine. I don't think that's always that interesting, but I don't know what I mean by more mainstream, but it might be interesting to do a magazine and, you know, like inject your own kind of language in it, either visual but also maybe textual, or saying like, I mean, I'm very specific with how I want things. I want like introductions to be never like sum up the contents.
Right.
Or those kind of things. That's kind of like little rules.
But there's so many things fighting against you, like the amount of text you want. You know, you want it to be, I mean, just the idea of an editorially based magazine is really unusual today, because
it
it's
is
so
kind of unusual, yeah.
Which is sad, but
magazines are going to be more and more exclusive, I think. They're going to be much more, or you're going to spend nothing on a magazine, you're going to spend a lot of money on a magazine.
So much more niche.
It's going to become more niche, I think, yeah.
If it hasn't, right?
Yeah.
Well, should we turn up the lights a little bit and we can have some questions? But actually, we should thank you. And I think they turned up the lights, so we can almost see. We've been a little blinded, but maybe if the runners could actually, if they can't spot a question, they've exhausted the question bank. Could have been. I don't know if there's someone in the back. Yeah. They're done. Nope. Oh, up front. Sorry.
Test. I think you guys covered the philosophical part quite well. I just wondered. I'm an owner of some magazines, and I wondered why, for Claudia, you changed to newsprint before, and then before that, in John, it was more of a very textural magazine. But it's kind of a specific question rather than a philosophical.
But where are you, by the way?
I'm up here, right in the center.
Oh, okay. I was already thinking. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, wow. Okay,
It had to do with cost. There was like newsprints like really cheap to make, and that issue I was kind of like referring to old Andy Warhol's interview from the 70s. So I thought like those two things could come together. And the idea was to actually kind of like continue the magazine in newsprint, but it didn't really work out. And I don't know, it was kind of a bit of a weird choice. I like it for that one issue, but for the issue that came after that, I kind of like didn't kind of like it anymore. Yeah. So that's why I changed it back into a more like a glossy format.
Is it physically larger though, with the newsprint?
It's physically larger, but I find it also like extremely difficult to make as a designer. I mean, design-wise, like big pages, you have to be really selective about the amount of images you can choose. Mm-hmm. I did it for one issue and didn't feel comfortable about it. Then I made another one, and then I decided I didn't want to continue that way. It was kind of a mistake, basically, yeah.
I was wondering, for the advertisers in Fantastic Man, do they just buy the space and send you the ad and you print it, or do you have some type of creative control over the ads? Do you critique them? Do you have any input into them?
No. I mean, in a way, advertising is a kind of, in a way, it's like free money. I mean, it's not free money, but in a way, it always feels a bit like that. Is someone going to book an ad or not? I mean, there's a big difference in money if they do. So there's no way you can criticize anything with advertising. If you cannot say like, "Oh God, it's such an ugly campaign. We're not going to." You cannot even say things. You cannot even even if you're like vaguely kind of like critical about it. It's like it's really not done. Everybody always has a fantastic campaign. It always looks great. As simple as that. And we have advertisements that we refused. And for Gucci, but they were sending, like the women's campaign. And we said like, well, come on, this is like a men's magazine. And then even like Tom Ford himself, he said like, oh, how do they have the nerves to kind of send it back, Because he chose that image because I know what he was thinking, what he was saying. I was like, oh, it would be great for Butt magazine to put that on the back cover, and then. We were kind of like, maybe it's not a good idea. The other thing was also, was one campaign for Gucci, and it was a guy with a child. And I thought like, oh, should that be in the whole campaign was, people with babies. And it was not it was not a child, it was a baby. And I thought like, no, let's not put that on the back cover of Butt magazine. And they were not even thinking about that. So then we got Yves Saint Laurent, which is the same company. So no, there's not very much things you can change about it, or and there's some. The only thing you can do is like maybe some ads you can put a little bit like further down in the magazine. There's this whole thing with advertisers that. With magazines, like there's the A kind of advertisers, the ones that are always like in the front of the magazine, and then the ones that are like a little bit like more the kind of like I said the Diesels and the Replay and the Gap are always the kind of brands that you see a little bit more further down, mixed up a little bit with the editorial, I mean, but Butt magazine is different because with the very first issue we decided to do this kind of logo ads, to just like put a logo on a page, and have some additional information. That's it. And because people are so used to it, this is actually an art project from Art Metropole in Toronto. They just bought a page with some kind of like, I think it's artwork. The page is artwork. Hey.
Yeah, we've lost our projection when that happened. But hopefully it's recent. It hasn't been missing for a few. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, maybe go back. Oh well, you see another always like 8 those are kind of logo ads. Yeah, this is artwork. This is an art project. So people are really used to having advertisers really want this because it's kind of effective. There's no sales argument involved, so it's not like there's no image almost. There's always only a connection between the magazine and a certain brand and. Yeah, it's so simple. I can hardly say anything about it.
It's a sponsor page. Yeah.
It's a sponsored page, but it's also like ground zero of advertising. It's like...
Degree zero?
Huh?
Degree zero? Ground zero?
Oh, degree zero.
Degree zero.
Yeah. Or maybe also ground zero.
It could be ground zero.
It's a form of anti-advertising. More questions?
Over here?
Hi. I was curious about if you had any antecedents of other magazines for Butt and Fantastic Man, because looking through the two of them, in the U.S. at least, the Fantastic Man reminds me of After Dark, which is a publication in the 1970s that was directed to gay men, but it was all coded within theater and opera. And it was the idea of the gay man as this kind of cultured individual. And then Butt takes me back to like 1997, 98. You had a whole series of zines out of New York City that were a response to the AIDS crisis. So you had My Comrade and Pansy, and you had things that kind of pulled that same idea of the jokiness. And I guess this isn't meant to be overly hostile, but is Butt just like a joke? Because everything in it has to have this kind of ironic distance, and it's all for a laugh, and it can't be taken kind of very seriously. And then yet, when you get to Fantastic Man, it's all about culture and advertising and the glamour, and yet the gay men are gone. I mean, when we look at it, it's Brian Ferry, and it's Helmut Lang, and it's Andre Balzas, and the gay content is kind of stripped out of it. And the other take I have on that, then, is it's very similar to what happened to a whole generation of gay men. Post-AIDS, they're gone. So is there a language or a magazine that can talk to men in their 40s and 50s in a way that's gay, kind of post-AIDS, without having that kind of ironic distance around it?
I don't know. If you don't like the irony in the magazine, well, you should not read it.
But is it all ironic?
I don't know if it's all ironic. I mean, everything is kind of like... I don't think everything is for a laugh. I mean, they're very serious interviews in Butt, I mean, the headlines are always kind of like funny, this and that. The photo series are all kind of, they're always kind of like playful. But it just starts with the title of the magazine. It's very playful. We chose not to be too political, because I think the political aspects of being gay are so institutionalized. It's not funny anymore. So, but we do want to reconnect the past with the future. We always, let's say, dig up people that were active in the 70s. There's a sense of nostalgia in the magazine, and we're very referential to the history of gay culture, and we're very conscious of that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Because I do think we're very honest in what we want to do with the magazine, the people we feature. We don't censor people. And with Fantastic Man, God, I mean, the first issue is campus tits. I mean, it's so gay as you want to get. And I don't think it's right with a magazine that's even called Fantastic Man to make it into a gay magazine. Because of course I've been looking at After Dark and to Details and to all this kind of magazine you mentioned. They're all like a big inspiration, and we kind of chose not to call it a gay magazine or a gay fashion magazine, because I think the tension is gone. It immediately becomes, you know, a gay magazine instead of a magazine where gays appear, straight guys appear, and they all have the same kind of playfulness about fashion and style without being, you know, a dressed up faggot. So that's what I kind of like. If Helmut Lang would be on the cover of Fantastic Man, it would be in gay magazine. It would be completely something else than when it's a little bit. I mean, that's the whole attraction of After Dark in the period, is that it's a gay magazine, but it's not like brought to you as being a gay magazine. I think that game is much more interesting than when it's like immediately right in your face, and it gives also room for so much other kind of guys to be featured, you know.
I think that
I mean, not the Brian Ferrys of this world, but maybe someone like Anders Ballas, you know, because we do have a lot of problems, let's say, with featuring the straight people or the bi-curious people or whatever into Fantastic Man, because they have really feeling they're put into a gay in a gay context. So and we don't want to censor ourselves from it. We don't want to. I mean, this person we're seeing here behind us is a good friend of ours, and he's obviously very gay. We're not going to say like, maybe it's a bit too gay for a Fantastic Man. He's kind of like, so we do. We're kind of aware of that.
I think
but we also don't want to censor ourselves from not being gay, and although we don't want to be a gay magazine. I mean, it's a contradiction, but I mean, fashion itself, the interest for fashion itself, from a male point of view, is also a pretty.
Yeah, I think the history of the codes, I think, is partly to answer your question. The After Dark could work within a subtext of gay culture, but the idea, there's something to me different about the contemporary notion about mixing straight and gay or whatever, it doesn't really matter, into another kind of magazine. I mean, the time has changed, society's changed, culture's changed. I think the signifiers and the symbolism and stuff is a little bit different, and it's a little encoded differently than it today than it was back then. I think would be how I would think about it, but yeah. Over here.
I'm wondering about the economics of publishing something like Butt Magazine, given that one thing that perhaps hasn't changed is that advertisers are generally reluctant to be associated with explicit gay sexuality. And I'm hoping that maybe that this is something that is changing. Does Butt, in fact, have mainstream advertisers? Is it possible to attract mainstream advertisers?
No, it's not.
And so what are the economics of it for you? How do you make something like this work?
Nobody gets paid. So, I mean, the whole magazine, the whole kind of construction of the magazine is kind of based on the idea that it's also like easy to make. So one of the ideas of creating something that only has Q&As is that it's just a chat. So you record it, you type it out, you send it to us, and we kind of edit it, and we send it back to you. And it's kind of a really simple kind of editorial process. Not someone has to sit behind his desk and spend 3 weeks of writing and doing research. It's way easier.
There's some advertising now.
There's some advertisers, and that's all kind of support. It's Marc Jacobs, it's Dior Homme from Eddie Slimane, and it's American Apparel, and it's all because those people who are on the designers themselves, they like the magazine, so they kind of push within the companies to have the advertising in, and they always face a lot of resistance as well, and but it's still not profitable. But we can right now like hire a studio, and we have someone who does the email and that kind of stuff. But it's not like profitable. We still don't have any budget to pay people, and that's sometimes that's really a shame. But I also think it's kind of good that there's no money involved, because as soon as you start to pay photographers and start to pay, especially models, when they're up for the money, and they're, you have the kind of feeling in the picture that the meter is ticking and they're kind of like performing for you. I also don't want to get into that. So it's still kind of like, how do you say that? They do it for their own pleasure, of their own fun. There's nothing else involved than that.
Right.
Hi, Jop. I am one of your most enthusiastic female readers.
All right.
And I just wanted to ask you, who would you love to interview for Butt that you haven't had a chance to yet?
Well, just did Joe Gage, the pornographer, that I really wanted to do already for a long time. That's a good one. Who's still on the list? Well, there's a lot of people on the list still that I wanted to do, but it's not like one specific person. I was talking about that the other day. We're talking about I'm going tomorrow to LA. We're going to make a special LA issue, and we kind of wanted to do Kenneth Anger. I think he should be in Bud. I would love to have George Michael in Bud, but he already kind of refused. It would be interesting to have have someone like that next to a butcher, like on the same kind of pink pages. That would be kind of interesting. Sorry, that's a very clear answer to that question. There's so many guys I still want to interview or that I would love to see in Bud magazine. Sorry, Al Gore. Al Gore. Sorry. Or maybe Al Gore. I would say Gore Fidel. Of course, Gore Fidel. Which we have a really difficult time getting in touch with.
Any other questions? No? All right. Well, thank you for coming.
Oh my God, Al Gore.